I mean, John Conyers is a jazz man, so that means he could improvise from now on because he is Mr. Jazz, you know. I mean, one of the highlights of the Congressional Black Caucus, in addition to all the other things that goes on, he every year convenes a session on jazz, a workshop, and a concert. And so we may not all be able to jump on a plane and go to the Rainbow Push, but we all know we can be on September 21st at the Congressional Black Caucus. I also wanted the special privilege of introducing our keynote presenter for this afternoon. And we hope that everybody is going to settle in and hang for the entirety of the afternoon, because we have an incredible panel here, an incredible panel that is going to, in fact, lay out the devastating impact of the war on drugs and talk about alternatives. And some of it is not going to be easy. Some of it is going to challenge some conventional thinking, but that's why we're here. We didn't get here by our choice. We're in this predicament, and we now need to find our way out. One of the reasons I needed to stand, because the Honorable John Conyers has to catch a train, and Reverend Jackson's got to get a plane. It is now my honor to introduce one of the foremost leaders of our time. One of the foremost leaders of our time. He is my former boss. I'm honored and privileged to say that for many, many years we've worked together, but I had the privilege of being the executive director of the Rainbow Coalition and deputy campaign manager for his 1988 campaign. And that's important. Few people have the opportunity to serve at that level. So many people that you see now, whether it's Donna Brazile and others on television, so they got their opportunity. They were, in fact, elevated through a process to incredible crusades. They're not just campaigns, crusades, 1984 and 1988. If it had not been for the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, there would be no Barack Hussein Obama in the White House today. Let us be clear about that. Some people may be confused. I'm not. But more important than anything else, and he and I, we argue every now and then about this, that, and the other. But as a civil rights, human rights leader on the issue of public policy, because this doesn't get changed because we're angry, don't get changed because we're frustrated and upset. It gets changed because we organize to impact public policy. And I can remember many, many times Reverend Jackson talking to ministers about how, within the context of their ministry, they had to begin to focus on public policy. And as an advocate, an analyst of public policy, he has no peer. He has no peer as a civil rights, human rights leader, and I don't say that in any disparaging way. He is just an authentic genius in terms of his capacity to analyze and put forth prescriptions on public policy. He is genuinely a historic figure. He is a historic figure who's still among us, still championing the cause. And we wanted him to come today because, you know, people pick up an issue here and an issue there, but over and over again, for years and years and years, it was the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson who's talked about the issue of investing on the front end instead of paying the price on the back end. I mean, he didn't just start this yesterday. He's been on this for decades, talking, going to schools and encouraging people to do better in their lives and to avoid the trap of the criminal justice system and all the things that are out here. And also linking it to the question of the social economic crises we face in these United States of America. Would you please now acknowledge the president of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson.
Let me express my sincere thanks and appreciation to Dr. Ron Daniels for his kind and generous introduction, for our kinship across the years when he was but a youngster in Youngstown, Ohio, feeling his way through, trying to determine the contour of his career. We've all been blessed and made better because of the continuous service of Dr. Ron Daniels, and he is all of that and more. One who has written the most consistent, whether it was fighting as an organizer in Ohio, him to write the document for the Black Convention in Gary, Indiana, helping direct our crusades in the 80s. He's always been there. Let's give Dr. Daniels a big hand, shall we please? Put your hands together. And there was the idea that John Conyers could not win. He was running just to kind of make a statement, but did not have the support of the Michigan power structure. Dr. King endorsed John Conyers for Congress. He won by 36 votes. Every vote counts. He's the only man that Dr. King endorsed. He did a robocall for Mayor Hatcher because there was so much black resistance to a black mayor in Gary. They challenged him not to come to Gary. He did a robocall for Mayor Hatcher. He campaigned actively for John Conyers, and both of them won. And so Dick Hatcher and John Conyers are part of that great legacy. I want to thank the distinguished dais guests who are here today, who spent so much time in the shadows, it seems, making this case for 40 years and remain on the case. We thank you sincerely so much. As Ron indicated, the Rainbow Push Convention starts tomorrow, June 18th through 22nd in Chicago. As we deal with this and other issues tomorrow morning, a big focus on that there are now 34 states, the same force that sought to deny the right to vote, now seek to officially suppress the vote. 34 states with some scheme to undermine the impact of the vote and determine the turnout and the victory in 2012. So thank you, Dr. Daniels, for allowing me to share with you today, you and Rick. 150 years since the Civil War, 40 years since the drug war, and we're still targeted. Targeted for negative action, but never targeted for affirmative action. Being black in America is an expensive proposition. Chances are a high infant mortality rate, a shorter life expectancy, and much pain in between. The war on drugs has not failed to achieve its purpose. It was politically inspired to arrive at a given conclusion. The war on drugs has failed to stop drugs. It's not failed to stop profit. It's not failed to stop political disenfranchisement. It's not failed to stop destruction of a generation of people. Or why I focus so much on public policy, I learned early on that we live in our faith. We live under the law. And people of faith must fight for just law. And many of us are stuck on faith and live within the limits of unjust law. We had faith, much prayer, much singing, powerful preaching in slavery time. But until the 13th Amendment was passed, we could not walk away from the plantation. We had faith in Selma, Alabama, but on August the 6th, we didn't have the right to vote. And so I believe in faith as the weapon that gives us the strength to fight for just law. But the faith without the just law is to be faithful on the back of the bus. Yeah. Faithful and disenfranchised, faithful and trapped under the throes of apartheid. Historically, African Americans have been the objects of degradation, exploitation, isolation, and despised. But the only group that required a civil war and the 13th Amendment to win emancipation from 246 years of slavery, then 100 years of legal government enforced segregation. The patterns of race discrimination and disparity continue today, most pronounced in the prison industrial complex, denial of equal education and employment. The tragedy of the drug war is the federal government took the lead in the race and class discrimination. Historically, we had some relief when there was a government intervention in this big debate between states' rights and the more perfect union. The government had to intervene in 1863, had to intervene to save the union and to end slavery driven by the question of slavery. It had to intervene. 1954, the government had to intervene. The Voting Rights Act, the government had to intervene. The 65 Voting Rights Act, the government had to intervene. To get EEOC contract compliance and affirmative action, fair employment, enforcement of these laws, the government had to intervene. Now the states' rights seek to end that intervention and to remove the troops yet again, leaving us as a people exposed to something less than full citizenship, government intervention. And so today there is some data that's well worth your reading today on the internet. I pray you will get it today. Report more whites use drugs, more blacks in prison. Blacks are the collateral damage, if not the direct object of the drug war. The nation's war on drugs unfairly targets African Americans, who are far more likely to be imprisoned for drug offenses than whites, even though far more whites use illegal drugs than blacks, according to a new report by the advocacy group Human Rights. The report to be released today said African Americans accounted for 62% of the drug offenders sent to state prisons nationwide in 1996, the most recent year for which statistics are available, although they represent 12% of the U.S. population. Overall, black men are sent to state prisons on drug charges at 13 times the rate of white men.